The Shark Deck.
I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. If you're a drive-by listener who just came for the It's Always Sunny stuff I put in the headline, that will be the second half of the podcast. We've got feisty news today. We'll start with Pete Davidson versus PETA. TMZ reports Pete left PETA a profanity-laced voicemail. Apparently, Pete Davidson left a heated message on Monday for PETA's Senior VP of Cruelty Investigations. Why her? Pete had gotten her name because she had issued a statement to TMZ expressing PETA's collective disappointment in Pete Davidson buying a puppy at a New York City pet store instead of adopting from a shelter. Per the report on the voicemail, Pete Davidson announces himself and says he's responding to the statement, which he calls uneducated and premature. He notes that he's allergic to dogs. And that's why he had to get a Cavapoo, which is a nearly hypoallergenic breed because they don't shed. He added that the dog was for his mother, whose previous dog had just died. TMZ says, then comes an expletive-laced diatribe in which he angrily tells the woman to do her research before talking to media. He drops an F-bomb, and I love this phrasing, makes a vulgar suggestion involving his penis. Pete is not backing down. They tell TMZ if Pete had done his research, he would know that there's no such thing as a hypoallergenic dog, that at least a quarter of dogs in shelters are purebreds, and that Pet Finder has listings for homeless dogs of every breed under the sun, including the one he purchased. TMZ reached out to Pete. Pete admits he was unaware he could adopt a specific hypoallergenic dog. He said he was told it wasn't an option, and if it was rare. And Pete said, I haven't seen my mom and sister cry like that in over 20 years. I was trying to cheer up my family. I was already upset that the store had filmed me without my permission or acknowledgement. Then this organization, PETA, made a public example of us, making our grieving situation worse. I'm upset. It was a poor choice of words. I shouldn't have said what I said, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself and my family. PETA said, our hearts go out to the Davidson family for the loss of their dog, but Pete must know in his heart there's no excuse for buying a dog and propping up the puppy mill industry when millions of dogs await loving homes and shelter. And we hope he'll do the right thing and adopt next time. More from Pete Davidson. He was at the premiere of Transformers Rise of the Beast. He does a voice in the movie. The paparazzi asked him about the ferry. Remember he bought a ferry with Colin Jost? Pete said, I have no idea what's going on with that thing. Me and Colin were very stoned a year ago and bought a ferry and we're figuring it out. Now, I'll jump in there. That's a funny line. It's a funny story. But let's think for a second. You don't just accidentally buy a ferry. It's not like there's a guy on the street corner going, hey, you want to buy a ferry? And because you're stoned, you whip out $200,000. That's not how ferry purchasing works in my experience, Pete. If I'm mistaken and that's how you bought the ferry, please let me know. So I personally don't think you bought a ferry because you were stoned. Pete then joked, hopefully it turns into a transformer and gets the F out of there so I can stop paying for it. This next story from The Hollywood Reporter, I'm going to go lightly here. I need to educate myself about it, but I think this is going to be well talked about. The headline, Burn It Down, a new book, explores SNL and its culture of impunity. Author Maureen Ryan writes that Lorne Michaels' long tenure as a power player and SNL's enduring importance are intertwined with a culture of impunity. There's then an excerpt addressing the Jane Doe accusations against Horatio Sands. And I skimmed it. I obviously hadn't read the whole book, but I read the excerpt and seems like a hit piece on Lorne Michaels. And I'm not sure how that's going to play in the industry. I've never met Lorne. Lorne's reputation seems to be pretty good. And the amount of stars that I think would side with Lorne Michaels if this gets into a big public thing, I think Lorne will have a lot of big names on his side, but we'll see. Maureen Ryan writes, during many different NBC regimes, Lorne's power has been near absolute, or depending on whom you talk to, absolute. The excerpt then talks about someone named Grant and says when Grant joined the show in the 90s, he observed that the lighting designer was an 80-something World War II veteran who had worked there until I think it was in the 90s and whose vision was failing, and he was the lighting designer of the show. During Grant's time at SNL, the rules, such as they were insane. People smoked in their offices in the early aughts, despite the existence of a Manhattan indoor smoking ban. I'll jump in there too. I've worked at places such as radio studios where you don't smoke in the studio, and there are some celebrities who are going to smoke in the studio and don't care, and it's really annoying. But to say that the only place that ever happened was SNL, it's not the only place that ever happened. The excerpt says the lighting designer and others had such long tenures at SNL, in large part because Michaels is, as Grant put it, the prime minister of his own nation. He has his own laws and his own rules. All of the current Comcast executives, when they talk about him, it's like he's, I don't know, Mandela or something. You know, this figure who looms largely over show business and entertainment at NBC. He's the last real direct connection between what we have now and what we had then, this magical, mysterious, nostalgic time, the halcyon days of television. Whether or not creating an awful work environment was Lorne Michaels' goal is irrelevant. For decades, SNL has been a frequently terrible, punishing experience for a lot of people who worked there or ended up in the show's orbit. The fact is, in full view in any number of books, interviews, and other coverage of the show, what is wrong is systematically and institutionally wrong, and Michaels runs that institution. He has had the power to change the SNL culture for the better on a number of fronts, but the hours, the pressure, the lack of inclusion, the punishing, manipulative atmosphere, not enough changes have been made to prevent the worst excesses of all that from negatively affecting many people for many years. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to say about that. Never worked on SNL. Never met Lorne Michaels. I worked closely with Jim Brewer. I don't remember Jim bad-mouthing Lorne. I've run into Jimmy Fallon, Will Ferrell, Jim Belushi a little bit, met Aykroyd once, even met Horatio. So I'm not sure how this is going to play. Let's see what happens tomorrow. I will Google Lorne Michaels and let you know. A Me Too documentary about Louis C.K. is not heading forward at Showtime. No reason given by the network, although I'll point out a lot of streaming services have been removing content. It's some sort of money-saving thing. But the Louis C.K. doc, directed by Carolyn Sue, was not told from his perspective, but used the comedian as a focal point to discuss the Me Too movement and where it's gone in recent years. It was ordered by Paramount Plus's chief content officer, David Nevins, who has since left the company. Back then, I remember this quote, "Louis C.K. is a slightly different situation to Harvey Weinstein and is a great, great comedian who has come back in his own way. The doc is no longer moving forward at the network per Variety, and it's unclear if the project will be picked up elsewhere." If you were trying to prep your podcast on Tuesday afternoon and you Googled the word comedy, oh my goodness, there were 10 billion hits about Matt Rife. Why, John? Matt Rife is kicking off a brand new tour. It's called the Problematic Tour with M-A-T-T in the middle there in caps. The Problematic Tour will take him across the country, Australia, and Europe, starting in July, going to October of 24. Matt Rife said, "I couldn't be more thrilled to live out this lifelong dream to tour the world, spreading laughter with some of my best friends, something I never thought would be possible." The remainder of this podcast will only be about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm going to really, really spoil episodes. If you don't want to hear that, see you tomorrow. If you don't like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, might as well check out. If you want to hear about the new season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which kicks off today, stick around. All right, everybody else gone in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Looper gave the new season 7 out of 10. They wrote prose. A rebound from the show's previous season with multiple belly laughs each episode. Last season was pretty good. More prose. Hits its satirical targets far more frequently. 16 seasons in, and we're still finding new ways in which the gang is awful, and this time we don't have to rewrite canon to get there. Cons. It's not the show at its peak, with some gags falling flat, but it's the closest the show has been to peak form for quite some time. All right, I'm excited. Looper says the primary reason why this season's more successful compared to last season is the topical targets the writing team has chosen to skewer. When it came to the weightier themes last time around, it felt like episodes were reversed engineered to tackle specific subject matter head on, forcing the gang to be at the center of the national conversation. Here, the stakes are much lower in ways that recall the stripped-down storytelling of the earliest seasons. Okay, here come the big spoilers. Big spoilers. Coming up, the premiere episode on tonight, The Gang Inflates, deals with the recession entirely through the attempts of Mac and Dennis to start a business renting out inflatable furniture. Collider says in the first 6 episodes, the 16th season goes in the wild directions we'd expect from the group. The gang explores everything from inflation and their legacies to trying to get Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul to buy their own alcohol brand. Coming after Charlie's search for his father last season, this season also brings family into the equation much more often. For example, the first episode, The Gang Inflates, more spoilers here, has Dennis and Dee attempting to get back into Frank's will, while Charlie's mom, Mac's mom, and Uncle Jack are around for more of the season than expected, which makes for a nice addition. In the second episode, titled Frank Shoots Every Member of the Gang, Charlie, Mac, and their mothers go to meet Mac's uncle and Charlie's sisters in order to gain pieces of their family's legacies. For the Kelly family, that means a giant jar of teeth, full from past generations ever since the family arrived on the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Margarita. Maybe the biggest surprise in season 16, especially with episode names like Frank versus Russia and Frank Shoots Every Member of the Gang, is that the show doesn't seem to be attempting any larger commentary. In Frank Shoots Every Member of the Gang, Dennis and Dee attempt to get Frank to give them their gun. And while The Gang Inflates does an admirable job of explaining inflation in a way that Charlie can understand, there's no larger message. The closest the show comes to commentary this season is in Risk E Rat's Pizza, in which the gang goes to a Chuck E. Cheese-like restaurant where they realize times have changed, and they rail about how things used to be better. Dee argues that Frank's experience with the restaurant with its racist jokes was a different time, while Dee and the rest of the gang miss the restaurant that used to have a bar, sell lifelike guns, and had animatronics that look like birds with realistic human breasts. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia back tonight. 2 episodes tonight on FXX. You'll get a new episode every Wednesday, and then on Thursday, the newest episodes will show up on Hulu. And that is your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. Smash that like button. See you tomorrow. All right, enough with the negativity. Hi, I'm Johnny Mack, host of 5 Good News Stories. It's a podcast twice a week. Every episode, I curate 5 heartwarming, uplifting news stories from around the world, showcasing the best of humanity, tales of kindness, fun animal stories, quirky items in the news, and you know what? More often than not, something about McDonald's. Can't explain why. I'll bring you a range of stories that will leave you feeling hopeful and optimistic. Start your day on a positive note. The number 5 Good News Stories. It'll make you smile to start your day on a good note. 5 Good News Stories, wherever you get your podcasts.